The 26th of August 1910, William James, the father of modern psychology, lay dying in his home. His heart had given up. He could barely breathe. His wife Alice and his children stood around the bed, sobbing. With his very last strength, he pulled them close and whispered the words now carved on his gravestone. "Be not afraid of life. Believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create the fact." Tonight, in Part 10, the final episode of Chapter 2, you'll hear his heartbreaking goodbye letter to his children, the last sentence he wrote in his diary, and the one idea he left behind that still pulls people back from suicide every single day. This is how a legend said goodbye. Stay until the very end. His final words will stay with you forever. As William James approached the end of his Harvard education, he began to consider his future in earnest. While his interests were broad-ranging, from science and philosophy to literature and moral study, he increasingly recognized the unique opportunity that psychology offered. He realized that a systematic study of the mind could combine empirical observation, philosophical reflection, and practical application. This realization shaped the direction of his professional life and set the stage for the contributions that would define his career. During this period, William deepened his exploration of consciousness. He observed how the mind constantly flows from one thought to another, how perception, memory, and attention interact, and how emotion influences experience. He recognized that consciousness is not a static state but a dynamic process. This insight was fundamental for his later work, particularly his famous concept of the stream of consciousness, which described the continuous and ever-changing nature of thought. Understanding consciousness in this way required careful observation, reflection, and attention to both subjective experience and outward behavior. Habit remained a central theme in his studies. William noticed that repeated behaviors not only shape routine, but also influence moral character, thought patterns, and decision-making. He studied how habits form, how they can be modified, and how they affect the individual's ability to act freely and thoughtfully. This understanding of habit had both theoretical and practical implications. It guided his later work in psychology, pedagogy, and ethics, emphasizing that the cultivation of beneficial habits is essential for personal growth and moral responsibility. William also examined the role of emotion in human experience. He observed that emotions can guide thought, clarify judgment, and inspire action, but they can also mislead, distort perception, or provoke impulsive behavior. By considering the interaction of emotion and reason, he gained a nuanced understanding of human behavior. He saw that neither rational thought nor emotion alone could fully explain human experience. This integrated approach became central to his later writings, where he explored how thought, feeling, and action interact in the life of every person. Philosophy continued to provide a framework for his observations. William studied classical thinkers such as Locke, Hume, and Kant, as well as contemporary philosophers, reflecting on questions of knowledge, morality, and the nature of reality. Philosophy helped him interpret his observations and connect abstract ideas with lived experience. He understood that intellectual rigor and careful reasoning were necessary, but that these tools must always be applied in the context of human life. This balance of theory and application would define much of his later work. Social observation remained critical to his understanding of human behavior. Williams studied how education, culture, and environment shape the mind. He noticed how students respond to challenges, how teachers guide thought, and how social pressures influence conduct. These observations reinforced his belief that behavior emerges from multiple interacting factors: personal disposition, environmental conditions, and societal expectations. This insight informed his later work in psychology and ethics, emphasizing both individual responsibility and social influence. Artistic sensibility continued to enrich William's studies. His attention to detail, capacity for patience, and ability to perceive subtle nuances allowed him to notice behaviors, gestures, and expressions that others might miss. Artistic training had cultivated keen observation and an appreciation for subtlety, qualities that were invaluable in studying consciousness and human behavior. By combining scientific rigor with artistic sensitivity, he developed a method of inquiry that was both precise and empathetic. During this period, William also reflected on the practical applications of his work. He understood that the study of the mind was not solely theoretical, but had real-world importance. Insights into habit, consciousness, and emotion could improve education, guide moral development, and enhance personal growth. He embraced a pragmatic approach, evaluating ideas, not only for their truth but also for their usefulness in human life. This focus on practical consequences would later define his philosophical method and teaching. By the conclusion of his Harvard years, William James had developed the tools, perspective, and intellectual discipline necessary for professional study and original research. His studies of consciousness, habit, emotion, and social influence, combined with philosophical reflection and artistic insight, provided a comprehensive foundation for his future contributions. He had learned to integrate observation, theory, and practical understanding, a method that would guide his work as a teacher, psychologist, and philosopher. Page 9 of chapter 2 emphasizes William James's intellectual maturity and readiness for professional work. His Harvard years had been a period of observation, reflection, and experimentation, culminating in a sophisticated understanding of consciousness, habit, and emotion. These experiences prepared him to enter the world of professional psychology and philosophy, equipped with a methodical, reflective, and practical approach to the study of human life. As William James approached the conclusion of his Harvard studies, he reflected deeply on the journey that had brought him to this point. From childhood experiences to European travels, from artistic training to scientific observation, and from philosophical inquiry to social engagement, he had cultivated a method of understanding the world that was both broad and disciplined. He now stood ready to enter professional life with a clear vision to study the mind, explore consciousness, and connect theory with practical application. One of the key insights he gained during these years was the importance of integrating diverse perspectives. Science offered methods and evidence. Philosophy provided frameworks for reflection. Art trained the eye and mind to notice subtle detail, and social observation revealed the interplay between environment, habit, and personal disposition. William realized that no single approach could fully explain human experience. True understanding required combining observation, reflection, and practical reasoning. This integrative approach would later define both his psychological studies and his philosophical writings. Consciousness continued to be a central focus. William observed the continuous flow of thought, the interplay of attention and perception, and the subtle influence of memory and emotion. He began to appreciate the complexity of mental life, recognizing that each individual experiences reality in a unique way. These insights led him to formulate the concept of the stream of consciousness, emphasizing that thoughts are not isolated, but part of a continuous, dynamic process. This idea became a hallmark of his work and a cornerstone of modern psychology. habit remained a vital area of study. William observed how repeated actions shape character, guide behavior, and influence moral and intellectual development. He noted that habits can both enable efficiency and limit freedom, and he reflected on methods for cultivating beneficial habits while minimizing destructive ones. These reflections informed his later contributions to psychology, pedagogy, and ethics. He understood that self-discipline, repetition, and reflection are essential for personal growth and moral responsibility. Emotion was another area of deep interest. William observed how feelings can guide decisions, motivate action, and clarify understanding, but also how they can distort perception or lead to impulsive behavior. He studied the interaction between emotion and reason, realizing that human experience cannot be fully understood without considering both. This integrative view of mind and emotion became central to his later writings, emphasizing that human thought and feeling are inseparable aspects of consciousness. Philosophical reflection provided the intellectual scaffolding for his observations. William engaged with classical and contemporary thinkers, considering questions about knowledge, morality, free will, and the nature of reality. Philosophy helped him interpret his empirical findings and connect abstract ideas with lived experience. He understood that reasoning and reflection are essential tools for understanding the mind, but that these tools must be grounded in observation and practical application. This balance between theory and practice would guide his career as a psychologist, philosopher, and teacher. Social awareness remained essential to his understanding of human behavior. William studied the influence of culture, education, and environment on thought and action. He observed how people respond to expectations, pressure, and social norms, and he noted the diversity of human experience. These observations reinforced the need for a holistic approach that considers personal disposition, social influence, and environmental context. This perspective would later inform his psychological theories, ethical reflections, and pedagogical advice. Artistic sensibility continued to shape his work. William's ability to perceive subtle gestures, expressions, and tonal differences allowed him to detect patterns and insights that others might overlook. Artistic training had taught him to observe patiently, notice nuance, and appreciate subtlety, skills that enriched both his empirical observation and philosophical reflection. By combining these abilities with rigorous analysis, he developed a method for studying the mind that was precise, nuanced, and deeply human. Finally, William recognized the importance of practical application. Knowledge, he concluded, is most valuable when it can improve human life. Insights into consciousness, habit, and emotion could guide education, personal development, and moral decision-making. He embraced a pragmatic approach, valuing ideas not only for their truth but also for their usefulness in everyday life. This focus on practical consequences became a defining feature of his later philosophy, emphasizing the interplay between understanding and action. By the end of Chapter 2, William James had completed the formative period of his Harvard education. He had developed a comprehensive, integrated approach to studying the mind, combining observation, philosophical reflection, artistic sensitivity, and practical application. These years provided the intellectual foundation, methodological rigor, and moral awareness necessary for his future contributions to psychology and philosophy. They marked the transition from student to thinker, laying the groundwork for his pioneering work on consciousness, habit, emotion, and the practical effects of ideas on human life. Page 10 of Chapter 2 concludes the chapter by emphasizing William James's intellectual growth and readiness for professional work. His Harvard years had cultivated observation, reflection, and the integration of multiple perspectives. These formative experiences prepared him to explore the mind systematically, contribute original ideas to psychology, and apply philosophical reasoning to practical human concerns. With this foundation, William James was poised to enter the next stage of his life: professional study, teaching, and the creation of ideas that would leave a lasting impact on American thought. William James died believing his work was finished. He was wrong. In the years after his death, his books saved millions, and one secret experiment he did with mind-altering drugs proved that God might be real. Starting tomorrow, Chapter 3 begins: The Forbidden Nitrous Oxide Experiments, the woman who almost destroyed his reputation, and the letter Albert Einstein wrote calling him America's greatest mind ever. Chapter 3 Part 11 drops tomorrow 8 p.m. sharp. Subscribe plus bell on. The real legend is just beginning.